shielding children from danger is embedded in any parent's DNA, and in times like this, keeping them healthy has become a priority. Since the discovery of the Omicron variant, scientists around the world have had to go back to the drawing board. Now, as the country struggles through the fourth wave, doctors say there has been a spike in children under the age of 5 being admitted in hospitals since the new variant emerged. But they stress it was too early to know if young children were particularly susceptible. Now, while vaccines are our only hope, we are yet to reach that milestone for the infants here. Only a handful of countries have approved coronavirus vaccinations for younger children, including the United States, Israel, and Canada. Now, will we be next? That's the question. And to give us some insight now, we're joined by the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research at the Northwest University. That's Professor Jeffrey Mphahlele, who talks to us from Potchefstroom. Prof, thank you very much for your time. Can I begin with the question about whether you are aware at all just what the timeline might be for these vaccines, which are now available in the countries I've mentioned? When might parents here be able to see to it that their children are vaccinated, for those who are going to be happy to vaccinate their children?
Good morning. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact timelines, but I think it will happen sometime next year. At the moment, I think the issue is whether children are a priority compared to other groups that are really at risk of infection and the outcome of infection. And then the other issue, Tony, is about vaccine equity. Obviously, this is something that if you have access to the vaccines as a country, sometimes you don't prioritize it. You will recall that a number of countries are still waiting, for their first jab for those who are at high risk, like the healthcare workers, those with comorbidities. And a number of countries have given, their citizens full doses of the vaccination, and they are already going for boosters. So it's raising a vaccine equity issue, but I think we can park that one aside because your issue is about vaccinating children. So in South Africa, it's something that is in the pipeline, but I don't see this happening before Christmas. So it will happen sometime next.
Indeed, Prof, and there are suggestions that it might happen that the vaccines for children most probably might be available towards June 2022, somewhere there, but that will obviously factor in the approvals by SAPRA. But before we get to that, Prof, you mentioned in your earlier response that the wonder right now is whether children are a priority. I mentioned earlier that Discovery, for example, saying that at least 20% of children were likely to be admitted to hospital as a result of this variant. Answer that question then that you put as a question in your response, whether or not children should be a priority.
Children should get the vaccine if we have got enough doses. There is no question about that, Toli. The issue here is that at the moment, if you look at the priority list, clearly they are not quite in the priority list, but they will get the vaccine when their turn comes. So it cannot be this year, unfortunately. It will be sometime next year. So in terms of infections in children, we know that they are susceptible. From the first week of COVID-19, we know that children are susceptible. What we don't know, and it seems to depend on the variants that is circulating at the time, is really the outcome of infection in children. So in this case, with the Omicron variant circulating, is too early to really make a general, a sweeping statement to say that children are at high risk. But clearly, if you go to the pediatric wards, you will see a number of children getting admitted. This could be partly because the previous waves were really targeting those at high risk, comorbidities and the elderly, and I mean the over 18-year-olds in general. So children were spared. So it could be that they are still the vulnerable and the susceptible population. But by and large, even if you look at the epidemiological figures at the moment in terms of number of infections and number of deaths, children are not suffering the same way like adults. So I think that is still a fact.
Prof, here's another question that perhaps is bothering some parents out there. The process of getting a vaccine for younger children approved, what would that involve? And keep in mind that we're dealing with a population that is most probably hyper-vigilant, given that a sizable number of this population, they are hesitant to take these vaccines that are available. So what kind of processes go into this kind of approval?
Is the same process that goes with approving a vaccine.
I think the connection to Professor Mphahlele is lost to us for the time being, and just as we were getting to some crucial moments or crucial points, hopefully we can get him back just to complete the conversation. In the meantime, let's move on to this story. All right, Prof, I'm told you are back. You broke off there for a bit. Can I just ask you to start from scratch answering that last question I asked of you?
Okay. So I think the question was about what is the process to approve vaccines for children. So my answer is that the process is not different from approving a vaccine for adults. So you have to test and show that the vaccine is safe and efficacious in that age group of children before you approve it. So it goes through clinical trial, and then the other thing that we need to keep in mind for children is actually the dosage, because quite often for children, the dosage is not the same as the adult dosage. So all these are tested, and they are shown to be safe, and only then you can submit your dossier to regulatory authority to show that the vaccine is safe and efficacious in the age group. And then obviously regulatory authority will consider the data for approval. So it's the same. You have to go through clinical trials.
So in all probability then, Prof, what would the doses be? What would be the amount of dosage be on children versus adults if we use the example of the Pfizer vaccine, which regulatory authorities in the US, for example, have already said that they have received the vaccine data from this pharmaceutical company, Pfizer. So with us, adults, we know right now that it's 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine for your body to be, I suppose, adequately protected. So for children, how much would that be?
I speak under correction in this case, Cody. I think it's still 2 doses, but then half the dose that you give to adults. So it's not the same, dose that you give to the adult population.
All right. Professor Jeffrey Mphahlele, thank you very much for your time. He is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of the Northwest, and he is within the research department there. Thanks indeed for your insights there, Professor.